Hi students, I hope that you're doing very well and you are either anticipating your break or enjoying your break. But I wanted to give you a brief overview of our passage in Hebrews chapter 12 verses 18 through 24. And we want to really think a bit about the purpose and the process of this passage. It's a very, very important one because the purpose is it really serves as the climax of the whole book. You'll see various kinds of images brought together here, but what the author wants to do is he wants to really drive home a main point of Hebrews, and that is that you have a contrast between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. So the purpose is this is the climax of the book, and the author is bringing together a beautiful, really summary of the implications of the high priestly Christology he's been teaching us in this book. Now, the process that the author uses is a comparison. We've seen comparison numerous times in this book, and here specifically he is comparing two mountains, the Old Covenant mountain, Mount Sinai, and then the New Covenant mountain, Mount Zion. So Sinai over against Zion. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to push the pause button just for a moment, read the passage carefully a couple of times and think about it, and then start the video back up again, and we can just take a look at several of the key elements of this passage. Okay, you see that this is a passage that is really laid out in what we might call parallelism. The first covenant here is painted in very stark terms, and I want you to notice some things about this mountain that cannot be touched. Now, you'll probably recognize the allusion there to passages from the Old Testament where the people were gathered at Mount Sinai in order to do covenant making there. So you have passages like Exodus 19, 16 through 22, 20, 18 through 21, Deuteronomy 4, 11 and 12. But you have this idea that the people are gathered at the mountain and it is not a good experience. If you'll notice, the imagery here in the first part of the passage is really very intimidating. You have images like the burning fire, darkness and gloom, and in the Greek text that's a play on words. It's napho kai zapho. So you have the darkness and gloom as a striking kind of image. You have a trumpet blast. The blast of the trumpet gets louder and louder, so it's a terrifying type of experience. And you have a disembodied voice. So notice a couple of things about this part of the author's description, which really is meant to describe the Old Covenant itself. So you have these images kind of standing in for the nature of the Old Covenant. But notice two things about it. First of all, the experience is highly impersonal. It's very, very impersonal. You have sights and sounds that really, in effect, communicate, keep away. It's like the mountain has a big do not touch, keep out sign on it. It reminds me a little bit of old horror movies that I used to watch when I was a kid. On Saturdays, sometimes they'd have these really kind of cheesy horror movies that would come on, and if I was staying with a friend, I probably could watch those. And what would happen is a couple would be driving through the countryside. There would be a thunderstorm going on, so lightning and thunder, and suddenly these people, their car would break down, and they would always happen to break down right outside of this really scary old house. And so they go up to this house, which is absolutely uninviting and frightening, and they're going to go up and knock on the door to see if they can get some help. Well, you know, because you've been watching the movie, that there is a monster inside of the house, and you kind of want to shout out, you know, keep out, don't go in there. Well, that's the type of imagery that we have here in this part of the description. And all of these come right out of the Old Testament text. It was a terrifying experience for the people. In fact, they got to a point, as the text says, where they said, we don't want to hear the voice anymore. Moses, you just go talk to God and come tell us what he says. They could not touch the mountain. If even an animal touched the mountain, they would die. So the whole imagery surrounding the Old Covenant was one of barriers and death and intimidation. It really was not a positive experience at all. Then in the text you have the Greek word Allah. It's a conjunction that shows stark contrast. So you have a but here separating the first half of this passage from the second half of the passage. And the but sets up the second movement of the passage, which is going to describe the new covenant mountain. By contrast, the participants have come to Mount Zion. Now, Mount Zion is the dwelling place of God in the Old Testament. It is often associated with the city of Jerusalem itself, and it is seen as God's special place. So you have parallelism here, or allusion here, to passages in the Old Testament like Joel 2:32 or Micah 4:2. Amos chapter 1 verse 2 says, "The Lord roars from Zion and thunders from Jerusalem." So you have a parallel there showing that this is the place that is God's special place, and it is his dwelling place. We're still dealing with apocalyptic imagery here because the author has in mind the heavenly Jerusalem, as the text says. So we have the earthly mountain, Mount Sinai, set over against the apocalyptic heavenly mountain, Mount Zion, which has the heavenly city, Jerusalem, which has the heavenly tabernacle where Jesus is now seated in the Holy of Holies at the right hand of the Father. So this is the city that is to come, as Hebrews chapter 13 verse 14 says. So I want you to think with me about the imagery that is used here. Here's what William Lane says about the imagery describing Mount Zion here in this second half of the passage. He says, every aspect of the vision provides encouragement for coming boldly into the presence of God. The atmosphere at Mount Zion is festive. The frightening visual imagery of blazing fire, darkness, and gloom fades before the reality of the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. The cacophony of whirlwind, trumpet blast, and a sound of words is muted and replaced by the joyful praise of angels in a festal gathering. The trembling congregation of Israel, gathered solemnly at the base of the mountain, is superseded by the assembly of those whose names are permanently inscribed in the heavenly archives. An overwhelming impression of the unapproachability of God is eclipsed in the experience of full access to the presence of God and of Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. Now that is language that William Lane is using to describe the welcome, the warmth, the inviting nature of the new covenant. And that's found in Dr. Lane's Word Biblical Commentary. So you can take a look at that. I'm going to pause the text just for a second and come back to you.